Okay, welcome to Experimental Psychology lesson number 2. The last lesson that I uploaded on YouTube, I did not include the ethical guidelines because I am done discussing that one, just to give you a heads up. For this one, what we need to talk about are the different kinds of variables, okay? So, but if you still have a question for ethical guidelines, since that kasama siya sa midterm, you may still ask me during synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, what is the control? Why do we need to control? Kinokontrol natin yung isang bagay because ayaw natin siya mahaluan ng iba pang bagay. Ayaw natin siya mapasukan ng iba pang bagay. It is the most important element in scientific methodology. Why? It's because of once we are conducting an experiment, we wanted to prove kung may epekto ba yung nilalagay natin or pinapasok natin sa gusto nating ma-measure. Okay? And also, it enables researcher to identify the cause of phenomena they investigate. Okay? Yung ba talaga yung cause dahil sa nagpasok ka ng isang experiment, yung ba talaga yung cause kung bakit nagbago yung isang phenomena or dahil sa merong certain things na hindi mo na i-control kaya siya nakapagbago dun sa bagay na yun. Sabi nga natin, ang isang thesis title or an experimental title must be specific. Ayaw natin ito mahaluan ng iba pang variable. Kung ano lang yung ina-apply natin, yun ang dapat yung meron tayo. Q-control natin or ina-isolate natin yung experiment na yun para malaman natin if makaka-apekto nga ba ito doon sa gusto natin ma-measure. Okay? The observed effect could be due to any one or combination of uncontrolled variable. As I am saying earlier, nagbago ba ang isang bagay dahil dun sa experiment na kinandak mo or baka may ibang variable kaya nagbago yung in-experiment mo? Example would be the effect of alcohol on task performance. This is the independent variable effect of alcohol kasi ito yung pang-control natin, okay? Ito yung ina-administer natin. Sa performance, yan yung dependent variable. Once we see dependent variable, gusto natin ma-measure yung performance ng tao. Okay? That's why it is DV or dependent variable. Extraneous variables such as prior exposed to the task tolerance to alcohol intake should be controlled. Meaning to say, nagbago ba yung task niya because of the independent variable na pinainom mo siya or nagbago yung task niya kasi bago mo siya painumin, maaring nakapag-drugs siya. When we say kapag nakapag-drugs kasi ang tao is maaring hindi ka malasing or may other effect to sa'yo or may other things ka pang in-intake sa kanya. That's why we need to control our variables para hindi siya mahaluan pa ng ibang variables. Okay? Operational definition and operationalism. Definition of concept by operation used to touch or measure them. This is necessary to eliminate confusion in communication. Example, alcohol intake will decrease performance on a task. Okay? With this kind of thing, paano natin gagamitin yung experimental title natin by using this operational definition? How are we going to define ba yung mga variables na nilalagay natin? Kapag ba sinabi natin the effect of alcohol sa performance task, bibigyan mo siya ng alcohol or yung alcohol intake will decrease ng performance task. Ano ba? Gusto mo ba siya ma-decrease o gusto mo pang mapataas yung performance task niya? So, dapat sa operational definition, alam natin kung ano ibig sabihin ng gusto nating sukatin or ano yung gusto nating ibigay. Kaya minsan, nagkakaroon tayo ng conflict once sinasabi natin na when I ask you, class, na ano ba gusto mo mangyari dito? Mapataas? Mapababa? It's because of, with that title, hindi tayo sigurado kung mapapataas ba nito ang performance or mapapababa nito yung performance. Ano ba? That's why we need to clarify. Okay? And makikita dapat natin yan sa operational definition kung paano natin ginamit ang isang variable. For a hypothesis such as individuals who take in more alcohol will be performed poorer than those who take in less alcohol. Okay? Maaari ka mag-conduct ng hypothesis na the alternative hypothesis mo, individuals who take in more alcohol will perform poorer. Okay? Or maaring ang null hypothesis mo is kabaligtaran. Okay? Dahil sa nakainom ka ng alcohol, ano ba yung performance task mo? It's either ang hypothesis mo doon ay bababa ang performance task ng tao or tataas lalo ang performance task ng tao kasi nakainom siya ng alcohol. That is one of the hypotheses na pwede mong ma-formulate. An experimenter has to operationally define more alcohol or less alcohol. Okay? So, dapat na-define natin with that introduction, with that operational terms or definition of terms kung ano yung gusto natin mangyari. Kasi nga, when we say the effect of, okay, magbibigay ka ng isang intervention, ibibigay mo sa independent variable para ma-measure mo si dependent variable, anong gusto mo mangyari? Bibigyan mo ng alcohol, mas madaming alcohol, or ililess mo yung alcohol niya, the effect of less alcohol. Okay? So, minsan kasi nagkakaroon ng vague topics or vague title. It's because of the title itself, hindi naka-specify doon kung ano yung nangyayari. That's why, I always ask you kung ano ba to? Pag pinasukan mo ba to ng isang independent variable, mas tataas ba or mas bababa pa? Kasi sa experimental psychology, inilalagay natin yung more or less na yan sa introduction. Makikita dapat natin yun doon. Makikita din dapat natin yan sa operational definition. Okay? And operational definition must be used to provide communication. Alright? So, ginagamit to para mas alam pa natin kung paano tayo makipag-usap sa mga maaaring sa instructor or makipag-usap dun sa babasa ng research natin para for them to be aware also kung para saan ba yung ginagawa ng experiment. Okay, next, number 3, replication. Data from research must be reliable. The same result must be obtained if the study is repeated. Okay? So, dapat, kung uulitin mo yan, yung certain research, dapat reliable. Meaning to say, data from the research must be reliable. Okay? The same result must be obtained if the study is repeated. Oh, sorry. Dito sa replication, dapat, hindi natin gagaya yung previous experiment. And also, kumuha lang tayo ng ibang variable, ibang bagay. Then, we conduct a topic. Okay, what's the difference between the others? Replication is performing the same experiment using the same procedure to find out if the same results will be obtained. Okay? So, bakit kailangan mong i-replicate yung previous experiment na yon? Okay? Gusto mo ba mapatunayan na yung result na nabasa mo or nakuha mo from previous experiment could affect dun sa same result na gagawin mo ngayon? Kasi if that will be the case, para kang nagduduplicate lang, para kang gumagawa na lang ng copies of that research. You need to specify also why do you need to replicate. Duplicate the results on another group of subjects or the same subjects. Replication may... Oh, sorry. Replication may result in one of two possible outcomes. Either the results are replicated or not replicated. Okay, halimbawa, you conducted an experiment. Okay? After mo i-conduct yung experiment, it's either na yung experiment na kinuha mo from the previous experiment could be nare-replicate ba siya or is it with not replicated? May nakuha ka bang other data to support from the previous research if that experiment is already conducted? Okay? when it is replicated, it gives additional assurance that the first results are reliable. Okay? So, meaning to say, in experimental psychology, it's okay lang to replicate previous research para malaman natin kung reliable nga ba talaga yung previous study na ginawa. Since that it is an experiment, it might be napasukan ng extraneous variable yung mga previous study mo, kaya ganun yung naging result. Or the fact that you have gathered is not, para sa'yo, is not convincing. That's why you want to replicate. Okay. Letter B, if it's not replicated, it is possible that results of initial study were due to chance. Okay? When we say due to chance lang, kung hindi mo ginaya, okay, yung previous research, okay, and then, halimbawa is different kayo ng data na nakuha, different kayo ng effect ng experiment na nagathered, ibig sabihin, baka yung previous research sa experimental na pinagayahan mo ay due by chance lang siya, nagkataon lang siya. Okay? That's why iba yung results na nakuha mo, or nakandak mo ngayong experiment. It might be due to chance. Next, or replication experiment might have altered some significant element in the experiment. Okay? Or is it due to chance, or replication experiment might have altered? Okay? May napalitan sa experiment, or kaya ba naging ganon? Bali, two-way lang yan. It's either na by chance yung previous experiment, or may napalitan na idagdag, or may ibang variable na pumasok. That's why nagkaiba kayo ng result. Okay? If that will be the same subject. Also, for instance, the instruction given by the experimenter or the use of different experimenter. Meaning to say, yung experiment na kinandak from the previous experiment, nandito tayo sa replication na, ay different dun sa kinandak mo instruction while doing an experiment. Kaya nagkaiba. Okay, so we need to be cautious when we are replicating. Hindi tayo basta-basta kinukuha lang natin. Since that there is fact already, may study na ganun, prove why you need to replicate such study. Okay? You need to search more RRLs. You need to be cautious sa instruction and procedure kung paano siya kinandak dun sa dati. And also, letter B, what are the steps now in scientific methodology? Some of you know this one already kasi dun sa fields, but brief discussion lang tayo dito. Identify 5 steps in scientific methodology. These are identifying the problem, formulate hypotheses. What are the research design, or what is the research design that you're going to use? How will you conduct the research? How will you test the hypothesis? And how will you communicate? How will you analyze the research results? Number 1, identify a problem and formulate hypotheses. Every scientific research begins with identifying the problem. So, like any other research, naghanap tayo ng problema. Okay, ano ba yung problema? And same with this experimental psychology. Since that experimental psychology, we are conducting an experiment, we need to be specific kung ano yung problema. Hindi natin pwedeng gawin na correlational siya, tapos ang dami niyang mga components. Okay? That's why nahihirapan tayo mag-formulate ng topic. It's because hindi natin maalis yung kung correlational siya, it must be correlational lang dapat. Si experimental kasi, more specific siya sa gusto natin mangyari. More specific siya dun sa variables na gusto natin makuha. para malaman natin kung may epekto ba talaga ang independent variable kay dependent variable. Kailangan natin maging specific. Kasi, alimbawa, sa pang pre-test and post-test natin, different yung tanong natin kay pre-test and post-test na meron tayo sa instrumentation, and different din yung components or yung nilalaman or sinasabing ni independent variable. Kung hindi magtutugma sa pretest na panukat mo at hindi din magtutugma yung kung ano ang ibig sabihin ng independent variable mo, maaaring hindi ka magkaroon ng reliable significance doon or reliable result. Identify an issue that one wants to study by observing everyday behavior or reading about previous research. Okay? Ano ba yung mga issue? Ano ba yung mga trend? Ano ba yung problem? Tingnan mo yung mga araw-araw na nangyari. And as I always say, na halimbawa, kung maraming nagiging tamad ngayong synchronous, ngayong distant learning, maaari siguro magkanda ka dyan ng isang experiment na kung saan inline sa procrastination. What is inline sa procrastination? Maybe time management. Ngayon, gagawa ka ng ano yung intervention mo or ano yung experiment mo na inline sa time management. Okay? Nakita mo na maraming kalat. Okay? Tapos yung kalat na yun, para maiwasan mo ang waste, maaaring magkanda ka ng isang waste disposal program. Okay? Pwede kang magwalis sa barangay, magwalis sa loob ng bahay, i-eliminate mo yung mga plastics, and so on and so forth. Refine the narrow of the problem identified to make it searchable. Ibig sabihin, kailangan natin maging specific. Kailangan natin maging narrow dun sa ano ba dapat yung gusto nating mahanap para mas maging maganda yung experiment natin. Hypotheses must be formulated. With this, kailangan natin malaman kung, okay, sige, nag-conduct tayo ng experiment. Ano yung hypothesis natin? Okay? May epekto ba itong program na to sa gusto nating makuha? May epekto ba itong program na to sa gusto nating ma-measure? Okay? It's either may epekto or walang epekto ang hypothesis na malalagay natin, or pwede ka pa magdagdag ng other hypothesis. Kung para sa'yo, yun yung hypothesis na inline dun sa research mo. Okay? So, next, stated in such way that they are testable and capable for being refuted. Okay? What refuted means. Alright? And, state mo din kung natatest mo ba talaga yan. Baka kasi yung gusto natin i-measure, it cannot be testable. Hindi natin siya ma-measure. Dapat yung gusto nating ma-measure na variable is measurable. Okay, kaya we need to be specific enough para doon. Next, should state clearly the relationship that is expected to emerge in the research. Halimbawa, ano bang relasyon ng independent variable kay dependent variable? Bakit kailangan makita mo na makaka-apekto si independent variable kay dependent variable? Ano yung meron siya? Okay, ano yung factors na meron siya? May previous fact ba na nagsabi na kapag nagkanda ka neto, kapag ibinigay mo to, is makaka-apekto? Then, that is why you are conducting an experiment kasi gusto mo malaman, you want to know if that certain fact is totoo. Okay? That's why maaaring ilagay mo sa hypothesis na kapag kinonduct ng experiment na to is that could affect or could not affect the dependent variable. Now, let's move to research design, okay? The researcher must decide on the design of the research. Anong klaseng research design ang i-apply mo? Paano mo to ika-conduct? Okay? What do you mean by research design? Example, a correlational study ba yan? Experimental ba yan? Qualitative? Okay? Quantitative ba yan? But we're going to tackle also kung what are the different experimental research design. Kasi sa experimental research design, it is a different. Okay? Pwede tayo mag-quasi experimental, true experimental, factorial, and so on. Alright? And these procedures are extremely important for conducting research. Bakit? It's because of, para malaman natin kung tugma ba yung bagay na gusto nating malaman, is that dapat specific at saka malino sa atin kung anong klaseng research design yung gagawin natin. They are laid out to overcome any difficulties that could distort the result. Kasi, halimbawa, ang research design mo is hindi akma dun sa title mo. Okay? Ang research design mo ay hindi akma dun sa gusto mong mangyari. It can lead dun sa hindi magandang result or baka masira lang yung isang experiment. Alright? By the way, I do know that I'm speaking too fast. It's because if you have questions, you may still ask me during synchronous and asynchronous. Okay, sakit ko na to. Alright. Number 3, conduct the research. Making decisions concerning the actual conduct of experiment. Okay? Before data collection, the researcher must decide which participant are to be tested. Sino ba ang gusto natin makuha ang participant? Okay? Ano ba yung participant? Maaring lalaki ba yan? Babae ba yan? Student ba yan? What instructions are necessary? Okay? Paano natin ikakandak? How are we going to provide an instruction dun sa mga participants natin? What instructions are necessary? And what equipment or materials are needed? Okay? So, for this one, for conducting ng research, ano yung mga kailangan mong test, okay, para magawa mo yung isang research na yun? Kailangan mo ba dyan ng pang pre-test, post-test? Okay? If you're going to conduct this one, sabihin natin through experimental design, ang gagawin mo, gagawa ka ng modules or ng set of intervention. Okay? Kung papasagutan mo to sa student, dapat itong module na to ay kaaya-aya. Okay? Ang itsura nito kadalasan ay parang siyang big notebook or isang booklet. Different colors, depende sa kung anong type nating participants or ano yung mas interest nila, hindi sila tatama rin sa pagsagot. Alright? Pwedeng iba't ibang kulay o pwede din naman isang kulay. Depende yan sa person na nagkakandak ng isang intervention. After nun, the researcher must, the things dapat na kailangan ng student, halimbawa, kailangan nila dyan ng color, magpapakolor ka ba? Kailangan ba nila dyan ng lapis, pen? Dapat, provided yun ni researcher. Dapat, prepared ang isang experimenter dun sa mga bagay na yun. Bakit? Para maiwasan natin ang extraneous variable. Because these kind of things, kapag hindi natin ito na plano na maigi, it could affect also the participants, the response of the participants. Yun pa lang kasi extraneous variable na yun. First, select research participants, then manipulate the independent variable. Okay? So, once we say manipulate the independent variable, dapat natin kung ano lang yung mga things na hindi natin dapat ipasok. Or ano dapat yung mga iwasan natin, tanggalin natin. Okay? We need to manipulate the independent variable. Lalo na kung true experimental design siya. Kasi, baka maka-apekto ito sa dependent variable at sa independent variable, ma-apektuhan yung mini-measure natin. Ensure that all extraneous variable are controlled. Okay? So, kailangan, if magkakanda ka ng isang experiment, bumalik tayo sa kanina, na kung may effect ba ang alcohol doon sa performance ng tao. Okay? Always mind that extraneous variable are everywhere. Okay? Andiyan dyan yan, napakadaming mga extraneous variable na pwedeng pumasok sa isang research. Dapat, nakokontrol natin yan. Halimbawa, dun sa pag-inom ng alak, makaka-epekto ba siya dun sa performance ng tao? Meaning to say, if that is the case, dapat aware tayo na bigyan natin si participants na instruction o bawal ka uminom ng alak. Okay? Or ito yung mga pwede mong gawin, hindi mo pwedeng gawin before ka masalang dapat doon sa certain experiment or doon sa certain research para ma-lessen natin or maalis natin yung mga extraneous variable. Then measure the independent variable. Okay? Sukatin natin independent variable. Okay, paano natin siya masusukat? It could be through intervention. It could be single case design. One shot ba yan? Quasi-experimental ba yan? Factorial ba yan? And we're going to discuss this type of experimental research design sa mga other lessons. The independent variable is usually one of three general types. Okay? Self-report measures, behavioral measures, or psychological measures. Okay? With this, sa self-report measures, pwede natin sabi na measure natin si independent variable based on how they answered. Okay? Sa test. Or it could be based sa paano sila nag-behave dun sa certain type of ng experiment. Also, okay, so ganun yung mga factors na yun. Number 4, testing the hypothesis. Okay? Data must be analyzed and interpreted to confirm or refuted the hypothesis. Statistical such as SPSS can be used. Example would be t-test, one-way ANOVA, etc. Okay? For this one, first bullet, data must be analyzed, interpreted to confirm or refuted the hypothesis. Okay? So, dapat marunong tayo mag-analyze. For bullet number 2, statistical software, pwede tayong gumamit ng SPSS. But in my experimental psychology, I would prefer na hindi tayo gagamit ng SPSS. Okay? Mas maganda kung manual natin siyang ginagawa para natututo din tayo kung paano tayo mag-compute, not only by through SPSS. Dapat identify din natin kung ano yung statistical treatment natin. Are we going to use t-test? Bakit? Are we going to use one-way ANOVA? And so on. Result must then be interpreted to specify exactly they mean. Okay? So, hindi mo siya, after mo makompute yung value, after mo makompute ang isang data, okay, hindi mo lang yung titingnan by, ay, mas mataas yung number ng control. Okay? Titingnan mo siya sa last number. Halimbawa, 0.025, si control yung nakuha mo. And then, nakakuha ko na 0.26. Mas mataas si 0.26 kay 0.25. So, mag-hypothesize ka ngayon ng ganung paraan, which is wrong. Okay? So, dapat i-interpret mo bakit muna naging ganun yung result. Tingnan mo and then repeat ulit yung computation, baka may mali ka nagawa or may hindi ka naisama. Okay? So, that's how we test the hypothesis. Number 5, communicate the research results. Write a research report stating how the research was conducted and what was found. Okay? So, meaning to say, alam naman natin na ang thesis or a manuscript or ang research cannot talk to itself. Okay? Hindi yan nakakapagsalita. And for us to be able na maintindihan ng mga magbabasa ang isang research, okay? You cannot explain kasi ang research sa magbabasa. Hindi mo ma-explain doon kung ganito kasi ginawa namin kaya naging ganyan yung results. Syempre, dapat ang libro or the manuscript itself nakakapagsalita siya, nakakapag-communicate siya, nakakapagbigay siya information doon sa mambabasa. Okay? Results of the research must be communicated to others as well. Okay? So, what happened? Anong ibig sabihin ng diagram na to? Anong ibig sabihin ng computed value na to? Anong ibig sabihin ng statistical treatment na to? Dapat, all must be detailed and all the relevant information must be in line dun sa research mo. This is often done by publishing the finding professional journals in a field. Example, Journal of Psychology, etc. Okay, so if i-publish ang isang document mo, pwede mong maibigay or maisama yan sa Journal of Clinical Psychology or may display sa isang library and so on. What are the researchable question or topics? Ensure that your research question is researchable. Okay? Baka mamaya kasi yung question na gusto mahanap ay hindi naman kahanap-hanap. Okay? So, dapat ensure mo na yung question na, halimbawa, the effect of vague questions. Okay? Yung ilalagay mo, or the effect of, tapos gumawa ka ng program na malabo. Okay? Yung mga gusto mong malaman is hindi sa researchable. Halimbawa also is that yung gusto mong malaman ay hindi naman pala sakto dun sa intervention or program na kinakandak mo. Okay, so it must be aligned as well. Researchable questions or topics are ones that can be empirical investigated. Okay? So, for this, ang research question or topics are ones that can be empirical. When we say empirical, what does it mean? Okay? Investigated. There are some words that I do not need to elaborate because I believe that you already, or your instructor already discussed that to you. Good research questions should be feasible. So what feasible means? Clearly stated, okay? Na ibigay, na alam natin malinaw, ano yung tanong? Hindi yung tanong mo is parang variable. May intervening variable siya. Okay, dapat hindi ganun. Dapat hindi siya para siyang, ano ba? Para siyang abstract. Para siyang lines na nagko-cross at hindi mo alam kung saan ba talaga doon yung tanong. Good research must be significant. Okay? So when we say significant, what does it mean? Dapat mahalaga ito, makakatulong ito. And must be ethical. We discussed on lesson 1, not lesson 1, but on ethical guidelines, which is part of the lesson 1, by the way, yung mga experiment na hindi dapat gawin at dapat gawin. Ano yung mga restriction, ano yung mga guidelines ng experiment na iyon. Okay, so dapat ethical siya. Pasok siya sa ethical guidelines, lalo na sa APA. Non-researchable problems include explanation of how to do something. Alright? So, ngayon pala nakikitaan nyo na kung bakit ganun yung nagiging title, bakit yung tanong is nagiging ganun. Kasi nga, nagkakandak tayo ng how to do something, saan to kasama? Okay? Maaaring kasama to sa qualitative interview kasi there is the word na how to do something, diba? Vague propositions, mga malalabo na hindi natin maintindihan, maaari siguro napakaraming component, okay? Dapat specific lang. Address philosophical or ethical issues. Okay? Addressing opinions. Alright? So, self-explanatory that hyphen. They cannot be resolved through data collection and analysis. Okay, so kung hindi yan mako-collect through data analysis at hindi mo yan mako-collect yung data information na sumahanap through numerical, okay, it might be hindi since that experimental psychology ang tinatopic natin, baka mamaya yung research topic mo, okay, and also ay hindi akma or vague, malabo. Okay? So, if that is the research topic, maaring i-revise mo or maaring i-stop mo yung topic na yon. By the way, this non-researchable problem include not only by experimental, okay, but also in qualitative, pasok nitong they cannot be resolved through data collection because in qualitative, interview, phenomenological, nag-data collection din tayo doon by the use of information, it could be interview, right? So what are the variables? Variables, topic to contents. Okay? Type of variables in experimentation. For these, variables are the gears that make experiment run, according to Kantowitz. Okay? Variables are gears that make the experiments run. Okay? So, meaning to say, para makapag-produce tayo ng isang experiment, kailangan natin ng variables. In every experiment, the dependent and extraneous variable have to be identified. Dapat alam natin kung saan si IV, kung sino yung mang-measure at sino yung i-measure. Okay? So, dapat identified yung ganong bagay na yun. That's why, when conducting an experimental topic, the instructor always asks you kung where is the IV, which is the IV, which is the DV, para identify natin kung sino dito yung independent variable, sino ang panukat at sino ang sinusukat natin dito. A variable is a set of any event, situation, behavior, or any individual characteristic that can vary to have at least two. Example, Behavior can be varied as good or bad rather, right? And emotions can be varied to be sad, happy, anger, etc. And experimenter can also vary each of these varied variables again. Example, good behavior can be varied as angry or very angry, right? So meaning to say, kung you wanted to know what the good behavior, it could be um, kung good behavior yan, yung yung variable mo, it could be negative yung isa. Okay? Kasi na-measure mo siya by applying that um, this emotion, this negative one. Okay? Effective selection and manipulation of variables make the difference between a good experiment or poor one. Okay, one way to distinguish between variables is to categorize them as a discrete or continuous. We're going to tackle that one. One way to distinguish between variables, ano ba yan? Discrete ba yan? Continuous ba yan? So what discrete and continuous means? Discrete variables, variables that come in whole units or categories, such as race. Okay? So, dapat ma-identify mo din kung ang variables mo ay discrete or continuous. Ano ba yan? Race ba yan? Sa race, meron tayong black, white, mixed. Sex, male or female. Ano yung variables na yun? Or state of well-being, sick ka or well. One can only belong to one of these categories also. Variables that form continuum and can be represented by both whole and fractional units. Halimbawa doon is attitude towards work. Could be extremely positive, possibly or extremely positive. Okay? This is the example of continuous. When you say that, hindi lang dalawa, tatlo, yung choices natin. When we say continuous, nagko-continue. Dito sa positive and negative natin, positive and extremely negative is by numbers. Okay? Not by only this one na by choices. Or not by numbers, but could possibly pasok sa pasok by numbers. Okay? That's why it's continuum. Variables could also be qualitative or quantitative in research. So, ano ba yan? Are you going to conduct an interview? Anong variables mo ba ay quantitative or quantitative? But, that one is not only for experimental psychology, but the whole itself. What are the qualitative variables? Qualitative variables vary in any kind. Okay? And manipulating a quality or attribute of the situation that participants are exposed to. Example, the quality of room lighting system. Okay? So, is it dim or light? Okay? When we say quality, saan siya papasok? Interview ba yan? Okay? So, this is an example of qualitative variables. Because, titingnan natin yung quality. Quantitative variables, okay? Quantitative variables vary in amount. Okay, we already know that one. Manipulating the amount of variable that the participant are exposed to also. Example, loudness is measured in decibels, or time could be measured in hours, minutes, or seconds. Now, what are the three variables in experimentation? We have independent variable, we discussed that one, dependent variable, and extraneous variable. Number 1, identify the problem, formulate hypothesis. Number 2, research design, okay, or the design of the research. Number 3, conduct the research, test the hypothesis, communicate the results. We discussed that one also. What are the independent variables? The variables systematically manipulated by experimenter. Ito yung minamanipulit ng experiment. Ito din yung ibinibigay ng experiment para ma-manipulate, para ma-measure ang independent variable. Okay? Its values are chosen and set by experimenter called the levels. Okay? So, when we say independent variable, Usually kasama nito anong level? Okay? That is why yung instrument dapat natin, if it's level, dapat makuha natin is level din dapat. Okay? Halimbawa, gusto mong intervention program, gusto mong makita kung may pagbabago sa waste management. Okay? So, dapat magkakanda ka ng isang instrument na kung level yung gusto mong mahanap doon is inline din sa level na gusto mong maparating kay independent variable. Okay? If you have question, as I mentioned earlier, pwede pa rin kayo mag-ask during synchronous and asynchronous. Example, increasing the amount of practice time should increase performance of a task. Okay? So, yun nga. Kung in-increase natin ang amount ng practice natin, dapat mag-increase din yung performance ng task ng isang tao. Okay? Should be one that can be manipulated. There should be variations in this variable, such as presence versus absence technique. Research participants are exposed to two level. Okay? Treatment condition or no treatment condition. It could be experimental group. Okay? That's the treatment condition. Yung bibigyan natin ng experiment. And control group or you're not going to provide anything, any intervention or any treatment. Example, a drug, alcohol, feedback, motivation, learning strategy, breakfast, etc. Okay? And for this, administering different amounts of independent variable to each of the several groups. Example, 5 battles, 2 battles, 1 battle, and 0 to 4 groups. Okay? Okay, so kung dito, tinitingnan natin ay pwede natin ibigay yung a drug, a alcohol, a feedback, motivation para makita natin kung may effect ba si experimental or may pinagkaiba kapag nagbigay ka nito kay experimental at saka kay control group. This is such an example of different variables. Okay? For this one naman, gusto natin malaman administering different amounts. Halimbawa, may pinagkaiba ba na pag pinaimos siya ng 5 basong alak or 5 boteng alak, kay 2 boteng alak, kay 1 bote lang na alak, or yung walang alak. Okay? Dito meron tayong halimbawa 4 groups. For group number 1, meron tayong 5 boteng, 2 bote, 1 at saka wala. Okay? Pwedeng iba't iba siya ng amount para makita natin. Halimbawa, ang title mo dyan is the effect of beer per bottle to know the retention memory of that person. Okay? Kapag ba nagbigay ka ng 5 bottles dyan, is kaya pa rin ba nila makabisado yung gusto mong makabisado nila? Pag 2 bottles, may effect ba? Doon sa dependent variable mo? That's how it goes. Number 3, administering different types of independent variable. It can be example, positive or negative feedback, type psychological illness, and IQ. Illness, IQ, and anxiety. Okay? For dependent variable naman, the variable whose value is observed and recorded. So, meaning to say, observed and recorded, ito yung dapat na measure natin. It measures the influence of effect of the independent variable, as what I am saying earlier. It is expected to change as the result of manipulation of the independent variable. We discussed that one already. Why do we need to manipulate the independent variable? It's because we want the independent variable na mabago. Identify the dependent variables and how they will measure. Okay, so paano mo i-measure sa dependent variable? Okay, meron ka ba dyang tools na gagamitin? And be sure, if you're going to measure that dependent variable, is align yung tools sa gusto mo makita. The tools must be specific also. Baka kasi mamaya, yung pa-measure mo ng kay dependent variable ay hindi naman akma doon sa gusto mong mangyari when you are applying the independent variable, or baka mamaya, measure mo ay hindi naman siya para doon kay dependent variable. Okay? may other factors pa na nagkaka-affect doon and nahihirapan tayo doon sa instrument kasi hindi tayo makakapag-come up sa maayos na result. Example, effect of type information given to participants on the amount of information remembered. Okay? Alcohol drinking decrease people's reaction time to a task. Okay? These are the example of may independent variable ka and then dependent variable. Effect of office plan on level of productivity. And type of learning and recalling of words. These are the example of a title or an experimental title that can give measurable answer. May mga epekto ba to? If you would notice, halos lahat ng independent variable is may effect, may cause and effect. So, syempre, ganun nga naman talaga experimental psychology, or when we are conducting an experiment, we are giving something. Okay? Because we are expecting something na mangyayari. Next will be controlled variable. Something involved in the experiment that could affect result. This need to be kept exactly the same for all test subject. Okay? So meaning to say, ang mga controlled variables, these are something that involve experimented that could affect result. Okay? So halimbawa, bibigyan natin kanina example na about nakaka-apekto ba ang beer, okay, sa recalling of memory ng isang individual. Halimbawa, ganun yung independent variable mo. So, controlled variable, dapat alam mo kung before siya uminom, ano ba yung ginawa niya. Okay, siniset natin yung mood, inaalam natin kung ano yung ginawa ni participants. Not literally ginawa na directly, pero alam natin baka mamaya kasi bago mo siya painumin ng alak, okay, bago mo siya bigyan ng treatment is may nangyaring treatment sa kanya. So, iniiwasan natin yun. Kino-control natin yung mga variables na yun. Okay? So, dapat iniiwasan at saka nililimitahan natin. Example, amount of water given to each plant, type of soil, and temperature of room. Okay? With this problem, magbibigay ka ng amount ng tubig para sa isang halaman. However, dapat i-control mo din yung anong klase bang soil ang ginagamit mo. Okay? Ano bang klaseng temperature mo sila inilalagay. Okay? So, this could affect dito sa mangyayari dun sa halaman. Halimbawa, nagbigay ka ng isang halaman na iba yung temperature niya. Gusto mo makita yung cause and effect. Okay? Meron kang experimental group mo, or minimesh experimental group at may control group ka. However, magkaiba sila ng type, ng temperature, at saka ng gamit ng soil. Masasabi ba natin na bumunga ang halaman na yon, or mas naging masagana, or namulaklak kung halaman naman yan na nagpo-produce ng bulaklak? Masasabi ba natin na namulaklak siya dahil dun sa amount ng water na binibigay natin? Or dahil sa hindi natin na-control yung mga this kind of variable such as temperature and type of soil na ginamit natin? And what is this difference between extraneous variable? Extraneous variable, any variable other than the independent variable that can influence the dependent variable, but it's not interest of the experimenter. Okay? A potential independent variable that is held constant during an experiment. If not controlled, a causal relationship cannot be established. Okay? Example, the effect of instructional strategies on the student performance. Okay? Example, this is the problem. So what do you think is the extraneous variable dyan? Effect of type of information given to participants on the amount of information remembered. Okay? For this one, the effect of instructional strategies on the student performance. Identify natin saan yung extraneous variable. Okay? Halimbawa, the effect of type of information given to participants. Okay? nilagyan mo siya ng, gusto mo malaman ang epekto ng isang unstructured strategy sa student performance. However, di mo na control kung ano yung type of information na kung ano yung binibigay mo. So, if we're giving this, if you would really want to know kung may effect nga ba talaga structural strategies mo, dapat alam natin kung same information ba yan na meron ka sa control group or tama ba ang information na ibinibigay mo? Baka kasi kaya naging low or naging high ang performance, may extraneous variable na pumasok. Okay? Alcohol drinking will decrease people's reaction to time to a task. Okay? Halimbawa, for this one, effect of office plan on level of productivity also. Okay? Type of learning and recalling of words. Okay? For this, alcohol drinking will decrease people's reaction to time to a task. Okay? So, what do you think is the extraneous variable ng alcohol drinking will decrease people's reaction to a task? Kaya nasasabi natin, baka sakali yung extraneous variable doon is that bago siya uminom na alcohol na yun is that nakainom na siya. Okay? Bago siya nakainom na alcohol na yun is maybe nakapag-drug siya or may nangyaring something. That's why ganun mag-react siya sa time. Mabilis pa rin. Kasi sabi nga, pag ang cocaine daw, nakagamit ka daw ng drugs is that hindi ka daw tinatablan ng alak. Okay? That could be also an extraneous variable. Or ano yung mga extraneous variable na pwedeng pumasok sa mga ganito? Type of learning and recalling of words. What do you think is the extraneous variable na pwedeng pumasok din dito? Okay? And if you have questions, you may still send and ask me to, as what I'm saying earlier, to synchronous or asynchronous. And please answer the question to ponder. Okay? Which variables are manipulated? Ano ba yung manipulate natin? Which variable are observed? Which variables are held constant? Then, number 2, give at least 5 topics that you have on your mind for research title. Okay? Add review related literature to support your title. Why do you think this should be conducted for an experiment? Okay? You must answer this one on your activity or on your module. Okay? After this one. after this lesson. Okay? If you do not have a question, then and you may proceed to answering this one on your end. Thank you, and I hope you learned something even though that I'm speaking too fast. I know that one because may nahabol tayong oras. But still, kung hindi klaro, pwede po kayo magtanong. And that's all for today. Thank you.